Welcome to the polling station. Of course, newspaper is now an anachronistic term because often tomorrow's news is out of date. And we're recording this on, what are we recording this at 11:30 on Thursday. And Paul Krishnamurty has just said, as we're going on air, who knows if she's even the Prime Minister by the time we go on air. It's been an absolute disaster of not only a week, but generally a premiership for Liz Truss. And she's under, I think, more pressure this morning than she's been since she actually became Prime Minister, and that's reflected in the odds with Star Sports. So we're going to go through that in the polling station. We've loads to talk about in terms of US midterms as well. A really, really fascinating race. I think I might go on about climate change, but I think this is relevant for climate change. What happens in the US in November and what happens in Brazil is obviously especially relevant as well. So we'll talk about that and Lulu's potential, if not probable, victory. And as ever, it's Johnny Ward with William Kedjanyi and Paul Krishnamurty. William, you're closest to the heartbeat of what's going on in the Conservative Party at the moment. It just seems that it's all caving in on Liz Truss, and the markets have accordingly reacted on Star Sports, not to mention the markets globally.
Yeah, and we speak the night after she went to the 1922 committee, which is something all Tory PMs do, who she gave to seek support. And the briefings from that are, and I do not say this lightly, the most negative I have ever seen against a British Prime Minister or even any British political leader. And we've seen things get pretty bad for some leaders. A lot of people turned on May, a lot of people turned on Corbyn. People in the end eventually turned on Johnson. May's was unlike anything I've ever seen. It was, I would have said, a constant 6-hour barrage of negative briefings and headlines from every single correspondent. Didn't matter whether they were print, didn't matter whether they were broadcast, didn't matter whether they were online. Just to give you a quick flavour, I don't want to go on too long.
Oh, please do.
But so some might be happy, others less so. And basically, here's what Lewis Goodall's site was, which was basically all of its describing the mood ranging from terrible to abysmal, sort of stuff you'd expect from a premiership in its dying days after years, not its second month. Tory MP on Liz Truss's appearance at the 1922 committee to Jason Groves, the Daily Mail. It was like someone trying to light a fire using a magnifying glass, using damp wood in the dark. This to Camilla Turner of the Telegraph. Asked how it was, one senior Tory says it happened. Jessica Elcott was told it was funereal. She asked apparently another person if they'd done enough to, or Liz Truss done enough to reassure the colleagues. She said, or they said, absolutely not. And Esther Webber, I think this might sum it up. Apparently a Tory MP told her it's the worst she's been to since 2015, unspeakably bleak. I mean, that is the entirety basically of the lobby getting the message, which is just, this is worse. This is the worst thing you've ever seen. It's about 2 months in. I think it's the 51st day of her premiership, off the top of my head. If you take it as literally going from, I think, being Prime Minister the first day. And yeah, I mean, it's, you see all of that, and then you see the way that the news covered it. And this was not particularly partisan or biased coverage. This was just reflecting what happened during the day. And you wonder, how can anybody see her going on, or past even today, maybe past even next week? This is worse than it ever got for Johnson in terms of like briefings. This is essentially the worst of Johnson without the walkouts. It never got this bad for May. Listen, it got pretty bad for May. Never this bad. I can never remember it being that bad. And what on earth did she do to turn it round? Because before I hand on to Paul, yesterday, she committed to no major spending cuts, which would seem politically to be the right thing to do, and is, I think, morally the right thing to do. But she's also not committed to turning around on Kwarteng's budget. The IFS says that 60 billion quid needs to be found. The markets are still in turmoil. She can't go in 3 or 4 different directions on this. You can't have the 60 billion quid gap be credible, but keep on going this through. I just don't know where it goes for her.
Yeah, she's 1 to 3 now, not to be leader at the next general election. And intriguingly, you can still get 4 to 6 about a Conservative Party vote of no confidence. I think we said, Paul, that the Conservative brand obviously became toxic under Boris Johnson, but Liz Truss seems to be a bit of a laughing stock now, and she's inherited probably a bit of a mess, but she just seems out of her depth. What have you made of it all?
Well, that's all you can say, and you know, like Will, I was reading all of these briefings last night, just aghast. Never seen anything like it, and the situation in general, right? I've watched politics for a long time in this country. There's never been anything even vaguely like this. We have become an international laughing stock, right? And it really is an emergency situation when the entire, investment community around the world is just looking at your country and going, what is this? What are they going to do? And the best that she can come up with is to make the matters worse. That she had one set piece appearance in Parliament per week, right? And she manages to make the situation that much worse by saying no spending cuts, completely confusing the message, right? So, I am very skeptical about the vote of confidence thing because I just don't think it would go that far. I don't think she's got any allies. I don't think, she got 50 votes in the first round of the leadership contest, fewer than 1 in 7 Tory MPs. And those people were largely just continuity Boris people who didn't have anyone else to vote for, so to speak. I wonder how many real allies she's got, half a dozen. And I did think that she would get a year because of the rules. I just can't see it going on. I backed her yesterday. I took 9-1 yesterday on it going in 2022, which is a bet that I could not imagine I would ever have. But I don't see how it's sustainable. I don't, we're in a full-blown crisis now. The Bank of England has said they're not going to prop up pension industry after Friday. I don't believe that's true. I think they will. But I just don't see how we can anything other than the removal of Truss and Kwarteng can be sustainable now.
How could it happen, William? I mean, it's interesting to know, to replace Liz Truss as Prime Minister. Keir Starmer is 6-4, 7-2 Rishi Sunak. Paul has 2.5 months in that 9-1 that he took yesterday, which seemed a long time in the life of Liz Truss at the moment. But how might it happen?
So first things first, the 1922 committee can change its own rules. If needs must, it's possible that this can go to a vote of committee members, and they could essentially change the rules so that Truss doesn't have that year's protection. Another way that this could happen, and this is what I think people are looking at as most likely, is Truss being told by her own supporters that the game is up, and just having the wherewithal, like Johnson, to just walk away. And it's interesting because Brady's already been to tell her some message of this type. Not that the game was up, but that the top rate income tax cut had to go. He delivered that message to her in Birmingham. It's not hard to imagine a similar situation like this, particularly as senior advisors are already telling her much of the budget may need to go in order to stabilize things. So we're already having these sorts of conversations. Third option is MPs can sort of blow themselves up, potentially. There could be a vote of no confidence in Parliament. Parliament can do it. It is always an option. A vote of no confidence in the government that enough MPs go with. This is a really noble fully on the sword option. And it would require quite a few Conservative MPs essentially to give up their jobs. So I don't know how likely that is. And the fourth really is that she just sees the whole thing as untenable, presumably takes some close advice and goes. I mean, I don't know how steadfast Liz Truss is sticking with the job. I don't know how Johnsonian she is in her desire not to walk away. Ideologically, she's really, really got a hard bent on her. I don't know what that means in terms of her, basically in terms of her ability to see where the future lies. So I'm not sure she'd walk away. I think that's really difficult to tell.
Just in a general sense of all, like if you look at Kwarteng, who if you had like approval ratings of Kwarteng Trust, and we'll say Jacob Rees-Mogg, who said he'd be delighted to allow fracking, particularly if he got royalties in his own backyard. Effectively, this was at the conference. These are the people you're dealing with here. I mean, this is just a series of catastrophes stuff for British politics and the Conservative Party, and like you do wonder about British society going forward. Like when you lose complete faith in your politicians, as will inevitably happen, like where is this going to end up?
Well, I've been saying for a long while that we're on the path to become an ex-Soviet mafia state, basically, some kind of basket case. And I think that when you mention fracking situation, and you know, furthermore, this latest news that they're going to windfall tax the energy companies, but not all the energy companies, the renewable companies, right? You know, they are just they strike me as just a vested interest lobby group, basically masquerading as a political party. Now, I don't think all the Conservative Party are like that. I think there's probably half the Conservative MPs maybe are conventional Tories, but I think that under Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings, the party was just captured by those vested interests, and until they are removed, the country will just descend into, you know, basket case, failed state. You know, look, we're talking now about an economic crisis, but I've been going on for a year about the sewage washing up on the beaches. Right, 40 beaches in the height of summer closed because of sewage, right? How is that in any sense a normal country where that is acceptable, right? Never mind any bigger issue. Why isn't there a reaction to that? And we have this media that is just, you know, it's like Pravda. It's like Russia Today. It's like any of these disinformation states, you know, where, I mean, what have we got in the Telegraph this morning? 2 pieces. I shared a tweet earlier. 2 pieces, one from Alistair Heath saying basically Truss and Kwarteng are like just victims based. It's not there, the economic collapse is not on them, it's something to do with the left, right? Another one which was saying perhaps hellish blackouts over the winter will have a silver lining because it will make the selfish, you know, self-important younger generation wake up. I mean, this is just insane. This
is a self-important younger generation who basically are facing a collapse in the climate, a complete collapse because of what has been the damage that has been wreaked by their predecessors.
Yeah, and I mean, let's also, I mean, why are we facing blackouts? Because, and why are we facing such extreme energy bills, regardless of Putin, regardless of the war? Because they cut the gas storage. Right, inexplicably, there was never a legitimate explanation for why they did that. And I think the only logical explanation I can come up with is they did it because energy companies wanted this situation where prices were even higher and profits were even higher. Right, they cancelled the home insulation program. Where is the sense in that? Where's the justification for that? You know, economically, socially, environmentally, there's none. Other than we want energy prices to rise because our sponsors will make more money. And I know I will get accused of being a conspiracy theorist for saying that. I get this all the time, right? It doesn't really bother me. But someone has to answer these questions. Where was the justification for any of that? You know, and now we're in a position where chickens are coming home to roost.
Before we finish up on the UK, William, so she is 1-2 to depart in 2023.
Yeah, she is. I understand the 2023 option being favourite. I do. And I think it might make a little bit more political sense in the sense that, okay, will be another PM foisted on it, but it might be a bit less farcical than her only being around for 50 days. But the only thing is, for all that to happen, this needs to hold for 2.5 more months, and it won't in any facet. So, to be honest with you, if I had to have a bet on this, I'd probably have a little bit on this year and see if you'd get a shorter price in trading, because it might well be the case because nothing looks to improve. I think the strategic plays now are to look at next party leaders and just to do so with an open mind and possibly with a a bit of a chancy move to see if you can get some decent movers, and it could be based on anything. I mean, I wouldn't be going massive stakes to this market, but it's 7-2 to field. You don't really have to. What we'll also say is I'd be desperately against Johnson in the next Tory leader market, next PM market, whatever, for 3 reasons. Number one, he's already making more than he earned as PM in a single year of a US speech. There'll be more opportunities like that. He only needs 2 or 3, whatever, to really rake it in. There's memoirs, there's TV, life doc rights, whatever. He's not going to want to come back and fight and deal with all this mess anyway. And secondly, he's got the same tarnished image issue as Truss. It's not quite as bad, but by the time he left, it was really bad. So I'd be against Johnson for next leader. I'd be looking at different scenarios. So maybe you've got 2, 3 contenders on the side, all of whom might shorten, and then you see how things fall. Because I don't see how this level is tenable for Truss or for anybody, I'd say.
Yeah, I definitely. Go ahead, Paul.
He's got a nice bet, Will, on Michael Gove. I think that's he's definitely a shortlisted character. Definitely, they need someone serious.
Before we go to the US, we don't have odds on Brazil, but you wake up this morning and the first thing in my inbox is something from the Global Hunger Index saying that 44 countries are suffering from serious or alarming levels of hunger for a variety of factors, but mainly climate change, which obviously makes the whole Amazon situation pretty important to our future, I would say. Are we going to get the victory that we all need here, Paul? I
think so. Bolsonaro has done better than expected, no doubt about it. But Lula if we assume that he keeps the vote, that he can repeat the vote that he got in the first round, it doesn't take very much to get over 50%, and he's been endorsed by the next 2 candidates. So you have to think he'll come through. It's not going to be much of a margin. It's going to be much closer than I expected earlier in the year, but I think that it's a solid favourite bet, I think, and I don't see any evidence or suggestion that the opinion is going to turn in these final couple of weeks.
So, okay, we may not have Brazilian prices, but we have absolutely loads in the US Senate and House of Representatives elections, state by state and all that. And William, this is actually a fascinating vote in both counts. Tight markets. 4-6 to Democrats for Senate control, 11-10 Republicans, but we have Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. So there's a lot to stick one's teeth into here. And is this the end of Trumpism? Will we know this in a month's time?
Can I answer the question? Unfortunately not. No, that's there to stay. I think the question is Trumpism going to be a force that can get candidates over the line? Or is Trumpism going to control of key parts of the US power system? Those questions, I think, are up in the air because a lot could happen in a week in politics. I mean, how long has this Truss been Prime Minister for, just for example? But at the moment, it's very competitive. And I think this is going to be a fight between candidate quality and policies versus the economy, namely in the sense of inflation and gas prices. Now, Paul went into good detail on this last week. He's been tracking this really closely. But the OPEC decision is going to have an impact against the Democrats in the US. Unfortunately, states where gas is a bigger factor will see a bit of a Republican turn against, unfortunately, because the decision comes at a horrible time, really, for Biden, when most of the things have been going well for the Democrats. They've had some domestic and foreign policy wins. I think one thing that is counting against the Republicans, however, and I think this is very, very important in these multi-million-dollar Senate races, is candidate quality, particularly in such a attack-minded climate as the US. Things such as your ability to communicate, your campaign teams, how likable you are, / how well known you are, and also what schedules you have in the closet will really count. So for that reason, I'd be leaning away from Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania because his campaign's been a disaster, and John Fetterman's been quite good. And I'd also be leaning against Herschel Walker in Georgia, because there was a horrific story, basically. Paul went into some detail last week about it. So I'm still really looking into it. I think at the moment I would go Republicans House, Democrats just Senate, but knife edge thing. It's a bit like one of those general elections in the past where you don't really know, apart from the fact that you know it'll be decided by marginals.
Yeah, we've spoken about this before. I mean, the Herschel Walker story itself, if you're to bring somebody from another planet onto the world and describe this election and some of the candidates involved who may or may not even be favorites for their general constituencies, it's crazy stuff, Paul. I believe the end of the world is nigh when you look at some of the caliber of candidates that Trump has picked here. But what have we learned in the last week?
I think Will's just covered it brilliantly, actually. A week ago, I was very confident that the Democrats would hold the Senate, principally because of Herschel Walker, because that to me is the pivotal state. If Democrats win that, I think they hold it. But this gas prices issue is a major threat. I think, looking at the betting, my prediction is the favourite wins every race. Right, and that would produce 50-50. Democrats retain control of 50-50. I think that Nevada is going to be, even though, the forecast on 538 of 50-50 for Nevada. So it's possible, and the Democrats do have a chance there. But what I would say is that in that state, gas prices are particularly high. The economy has particularly suffered through COVID onwards, really. And you have the Democrat vote there is very much the Democrats win Nevada by getting the vote out.
And a lot of Latino voters as well going to be important in Nevada.
That's right. They have to get, and the Culinary Workers Union are particularly influential. I think they're going to struggle to get that vote out in the way they have done in recent elections, and therefore I'd go Republican in that. But as we say, then it boils down to 3 states: Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona. And as Will says, it's candidates. It's about candidates. Mehmet Oz is just an awful, awful candidate. He's ridiculous. And I think that, and like Walker, I think that because Trump was successful, there's this trend towards, let's pick a celebrity candidate with big name recognition. But it's not the same thing. For everything that I will say against Donald Trump, you have to acknowledge that he's a political phenomenon. He wasn't just a celebrity, right? The guy built up a political brand on Twitter for years before he ran, right? These people aren't politicians. They're just crazies. Herschel Walker is like, it's unbelievable they would pick him. And Mehmet Oz isn't even from Pennsylvania. He's a carpetbagger. He's from New Jersey, right? And he works for the Turkish government. And he is exposed as experiments on puppies, right? And there's loads and loads of footage of various men.
He's 6 to 4. Like, he's 6 to 4. How can you make this shit up?
Yeah, well, that's because look, if they'd picked a normal candidate in Pennsylvania, no doubt he won it.
Yeah,
right. But they've picked him, right? And he didn't even do. The thing as well is that for all the celebrity thing, he only sneaked through the primary, right? Virtual photo finish, despite Trump's endorsement, in a very Trumpy. The Republicans in Pennsylvania are very Trumpy, right? And so, no, I can't see that happening. So, yeah, I would go for all the favourites. And in honesty, looking at those bets, 9-2, about exactly 50 seats for the Republicans, that's probably a good bet. There's a better chance than that.
Yeah, it's obviously fascinating between the two, where you get votes per state and votes per population, and then you mix all this in, and you have like the potentially what's going on with the future of Joe Biden, what's going on with Trump. But I don't know, William, between all the abortion stuff, climate, and the economy, and all this, if you are a Democrat, you got to be worrying for the future of this country if this goes against you.
Yeah, you have to be. To be fair, that's a situation that many Democratic voters who are engaged will have had for a decade, or at least very much heightened since the last 4 years. I think that's the stakes being higher. In a way, it might help the Democrats just to pull in some of those voters who might be a bit more on the fence. We saw this with the voting intention and the jump, particularly in the respondents of women of all kinds and women of colour, after that suddenly Democrats' chances improved. Whether that will hold, I don't know. My feeling is yes, because the anger at the decision is still very high and the campaigning has been very effective. But I think I'd agree with Paul in the sense that I think it would just be very tight, and I'd probably just about favour every favourite, but I think, and this is important to remember, you've still got time to make your decisions. With this, these markets, I think, can only move so far because of, if Mehmet Oz can be 6-4 after everything, how far really do you think the market can swing? What more can he do? What more can Herschel Walker do to be not? So we're getting quality polling and quality forecasting. You can still wait. You can still make a choice. At the moment, I see the Democrats just holding on, but I would probably wait a week or two to see what economic changes are a bit close to making a decision.
That's the same question to you that I put to William Paul, just in terms of Trumpism. If he's holding the GOP, if a lot of these loons lose their elections, and a lot of basically the Trump subordinates, and it's a bad election for the Conservatives in general, can the party start to finally break itself away? He has all these things coming down the track that he's trying to basically stymie for the last 2 years. Where are we in 12 months' time with Trumpism?
My feeling, I do think that Trump will be taken down by the law. I really do, right? And also, he is just not their best candidate, because even if you have the same agenda, which I happily will call fascism, right? You don't. It's the most effective way of pursuing that agenda is not with him, because he is absolutely damaged goods, and he is the most toxic person ever, who even people who aren't into politics, they have an opinion about him, and the majority opinion is negative, right? Whereas Ron DeSantis could easily be the candidate, or someone like Tom Cotton, and they would get a fair hearing, and they would run a far more competent ship than Trump ever did, right? And I think that would be, I'm completely worried for humanity and the planet. Anyone who follows me on Twitter knows this. I never shut up about it.
Well, it's right? Sevens on Republicans in Florida, for example. In light of Hurricane Ian, you're like,
yeah, it's a certainty that they've got Florida in the bag. I don't see any. That's now a red state. Okay, things have changed there. If you wanted an upset, I'll just throw one potential upset in there. And I can't believe I'm saying this because it's a very red state. But Ohio is quite interesting because, again, the Republican candidate is terrible. J.D. Vance is terrible. He's not authentic at all. And the Democrat guy is very much appeals to the white working class Ohio, right? And they have, one of the senators in Ohio, despite it being a very red state, is a Democrat of the same ilk, Sherrod Brown. So stranger things have happened. That if there's an upset in there, that would be my one.
You've got 1 minute left to wrap us up here, William.
Everything appears to be on fire, but I think the three main takeaways I'd have from a punting point of view are: get ready for very fast moves in the UK domestically if you're betting. It might be better to be more patient in the US. Also, with Brazil, there's a 4-week gap between round one and runoff. Patrick Flynn of Smarkets wrote a great piece on how often it is round one leaders win. The base rate for Lula, about 75%. So make your choice based on that.
That was William Kedjanyi and Paul Krishnamurty. I think the general consensus is we're all screwed, but we hope that the Democrats do well next month. And Liz, your time is probably running out. But when? Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.